In 1083 AD, William the Conqueror was approaching his 20th year as the King of England. His time as king had shown him that he had enemies everywhere. Foreign invaders attempted to take what was rightfully his own dukes rose up in rebellion against him. And to the north, a shadow was growing. In hushed whispers in every court in the land, one question reigned supreme. Who truly rules England? William the Conqueror? Or Morcar the Mad? The Heretic Rebellion was causing chaos in the southwest of England, and King William was nowhere to be found. Morcar knew that he had an opportunity. Morcar secretly admired the Heretics and sympathised with them, but he knew that he could not help them directly. In time, he reasoned, he would be able to raise his own banner in revolt, but first he needed allies. Morcar wrote to the King of Scotland and offered him a non-aggression pact, hoping to sow the seeds of a future alliance. At the same time, he set to work establishing a faction, demanding independence for the people of York. It did not take long for the King of Scotland to send his reply.
You, the Duke of York, the King of England's lapdog. You come to the proud people of Scotland seeking friendship? Yeah, sure, sounds good.
After this brief display of diplomatic competence, Morcar decided to make his horse his chancellor. Unfortunately, shortly after taking on the position, the horse ran away and could not be found, so Morcar replaced it with a human again. In the meantime, the King of Scotland had agreed to an alliance, with some strings attached.
Now that we're such good friends, do you fancy helping us out with these 3 wars we've got going on?
Before soliciting the political friendship of the Scots, Morcar had neglected to check if they were currently at war with anyone. They were in fact at war with everyone, including a small Irish king, a little girl, and some of their own people. Hoping that the Scots would return the favour down the line, Morcar sent his armies north, engaged the Irish in battle, and recaptured the Scottish capital. Unfortunately, while Morcar was away, his spymaster, Count Jean of Leeds, died of severe stress. Since Count Jean had died without any heirs, his lands instead passed to the Duke of Kent, who had a reputation for being a bit cheeky. This transaction meant that the Duke of York was no longer responsible for Leeds, and Leeds was separated from the rest of Yorkshire. There are many people in Yorkshire today who wish this was still the case. Count Jean's replacement as spymaster was a man called Ralph, which is also the name of my girlfriend's dog. As a second heretical army formed in Cumberland, Duke Morcar returned back to his own territory to reclaim the land that had been stolen by the Welsh. After thoroughly embarrassing the Welsh once again, peace was restored in Duke Morcar's lands. A few days later, he received a mysterious letter.
Dear Duke Morcar, heard the king doesn't like you either. Want to be friends? Yours faithlessly, Arthur and the Heretics.
Morcar responded that while the laws of the kingdom prohibited him from openly endorsing heretical armies, he was kind of cool with what was going on. Although he did stress that when he said he was cool with what was going on, he wasn't cool with the growing smallpox epidemic that was making its way through the British Isles. Thankfully, Morcar had other things to focus on, as his son Greggs had finally come of age. Greggs was a kind boy, humble, honest, patient, but still brave. Morcar quickly set about trying to find a wife for his son. He quickly found the perfect candidate. The girl was ambitious, brave, and nearly an adult. The girl's father gave Morcar the all-clear, and the wedding was planned. At the Battle of Hereford, Morcar was cleaning up the remaining Welsh armies when a young man challenged him to a duel. With his years of real combat experience, Morcar quickly dealt with the boy by stabbing him right in the eye. It is reported by some scholars that as the boy lay gurgling and dying, Morcar turned to his troops and said the following. Life is but a walking shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nought. After this brief moment of lucidity, it is said that Morcar went off to try and copulate with a tree. His lunacy was growing. The man Morcar had hired to replace his horse as Chancellor promptly died of the Great Pox. This dead Chancellor had been in charge of teaching Morcar's son Dale a few things, so he instead entrusted his son to the protection of a giant. Morcar was then informed that he'd received a second letter from the Heretics.
Dear Morks, can I call you Morks? Should be fighting William's army tomorrow. Glad to see you're not coming to help him. Very cool. We outnumber the King's men 3-1, so should be a real doozy. Speak soon, Arthur and the Heretics.
Unfortunately, despite their bravado and their significant numerical advantage, the heretics were defeated by William the Conqueror. Arthur was imprisoned and subsequently died in prison. Sadly, the dream of a heretical uprising died with Arthur. Morcar redirected his efforts to launching a revenge counterattack on Wales. In the process of besieging their capital, he captured a lot of people. Since he was a kind soul and his prisons were somewhat crowded, Morcar decided to release all of the prisoners. The little girl who'd been waging war on Scotland was now a teenager, thus earning her the nickname the Teen Queen. Her people loved her. Aye, Queen. Slay. In another display of girl power, Adelheid, Morcar's wife, had recovered from her bout of consumption. She then quickly contracted smallpox. This was unsurprising given that most of the British Isles had contracted smallpox. Thankfully, Morcar was able to distract people with a wedding, as Greg's betrothed had finally grown into a woman. In the meantime, Morcar's daughter, Yorkshire Gold, had come of age and was now ready to get married off for money or something. While on the hunt for an adequate suitor, Morcar told Yorkshire Gold to stay put, which, since she was shy, shouldn't be too much of an issue. I mean, her one job is just to wait to get married, how hard can that be? Suddenly, around the British Isles, people received words that the ownership of Stonehenge had passed from King William to his eldest son. Also, King William was dead. Morcar knew that the time to act was now. He quickly set about wrapping up his affairs, sending an army north to end all the ongoing wars in Scotland. As Morcar once again abandoned his family to wage war in a foreign country, he received word from the new king asking him to become the Marshal of England. In a move that has been widely described by historians as a bit petty, Morcar said no. Things in Scotland quickly became complicated when the new King of England decided to wage war on them. This strange turn of events meant that Morcar, while still allied to Scotland, was also at war with them. To avoid any conflict of interest, he just made sure that his armies avoided the Scottish armies, and vice versa. As Morcar received the troubling news that his son Greg's had contracted smallpox, he received the uplifting news that his court physician was pretty good at their job. Then came the crushing news that Morcar had no power to rename Greg's new son. Say hello to Thurkitel. In a bid to find more allies to support his upcoming war against the King of England, Morcar proposed the betrothal of his son Bisto with the daughter of an Irish king. The Irish king accepted the betrothal but wasn't quite ready to announce a formal alliance, so Morcar sent him some money, which seemed to change his mind. Morcar publicly announced that it was his new ambition to become the King of England. The insurrection preparations, however, were sadly disrupted when Morcar learned that his son Dale had been murdered. To this day, nobody knows who was responsible. As a coping mechanism to deal with his profound sense of grief, Morcar continued looking for allies. Seeing that the Duke of Normandy had an unmarried son, Morcar frantically searched for his daughter, hoping to offer her up to secure an alliance. It was then that Morcar discovered that his daughter was pregnant. Yorkshire Gold shortly gave birth to a bastard son. The father was a 47-year-old man. Even worse, the man was a commoner, making the whole relationship politically worthless. Thankfully, not everyone seemed to know about the bastard child, and Morcar successfully auctioned off his daughter to the Duke of Normandy's son. Out of sight, out of mind. Morcar offered the Duke of Normandy a full alliance, but unfortunately hadn't learned his lesson from what had happened with Scotland. The Duke of Normandy immediately requested that Morcar join his wars. Begrudgingly, Morcar set sail, but he did receive some good news. His new Chancellor had successfully managed to fabricate certain untruths about whether or not Morcar had a right to the English throne. On top of that, Scotland had finally ended their war with the Teen Queen. As soon as Morcar landed in Normandy, the Duke of Normandy had his title usurped by someone else, rendering the whole alliance pointless. Having survived his bout of smallpox, Greg's and his wife had a daughter and gave her a really stupid name, and England and Scotland made peace. It was now or never. Morcar quickly sailed home and announced that he was revolting against the king. In the city of York, Morcar addressed his people and said, "I have the right to be King of England, but don't look up whether or not that's true, because trust me, it's real. I could get some sources for you from someone. I know him, but you wouldn't know him because he lives in a different city." And so it was that the Yorkshire revolt against the King of England began in earnest. The noble Irish agreed to join the war and frankly saved the day as they arrived just in time to turn the tide of the first battle against the king. Morcar marched his forces and the Irish army down to London and laid siege to England's capital. For a brief time, the war effort was incredibly successful. On top of that, Morcar managed to successfully negotiate the engagement of his grandson with the daughter of the Holy Roman Emperor. This is how big the Holy Roman Empire was at the time. Not a bad deal. Celebrations were short-lived, however, as Greggs contracted camp fever. So did pretty much everyone within 100 miles. Morcar developed a fever, and his renowned physician decided that it was likely he was developing rabies and ordered him to hang upside down like a bat. Surprisingly, this didn't help, and Morcar's symptoms worsened. Unperturbed by these developments, Morcar continued his march through England. It was en route to the next battle that Morcar himself was diagnosed with camp fever. He once again insisted that a new treatment be tried on him, given that he was so brave. This time it didn't go quite so well, as his physician shoved diseased tissue into his wounds. As Morcar's forces met the King of England's in battle, he suddenly collapsed. As he lay prone, surrounded by a war of his own design, Morcar departed this mortal coil. The war was over. It was now up to Morcar's son to continue his father's legacy. But that is a story for another day. Duke Morcar of York lived a complicated life, and to this day his name resonates through the annals of time. And also in the comments section, where I encourage you to leave your thoughts.